Hello sewing friends, and welcome to our Summer's End Sew Along, featuring the Summer's End collection by Figo Fabrics. For those of you that have registered, this is our first week and we'll be working on 2 blocks. For those of you that did not register for the program and are interested in this beautiful collection, please click the link in the description box below. Here we go. For a 4-pointed star, you're going to take the fabrics that you've received and you're going to cut your greens. You're going to cut 4 4.5-inch squares, and you're going to cut 2 5-inch squares. And then from our print, you're going to cut 1 4.5-inch square and then 2 5-inch squares. Now I'm going to take my iron off marking pen and I'm going to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of our B squares, which are the green 5-inch squares, like so. We're now going to take our D squares, which are the print 5-inch square, and then we're going to put these right sides together and right sides together. I'm going to place a pin on both sides of our drawn line because we'll be sewing on the diagonal, which has a lot of stretch. And now what we're going to do, we're going to go to the sewing machine. We're going to sew 1/4 of an inch from the drawn line, and then again on this side 1/4 of an inch from the drawn line. We'll do the same for both squares. Just a couple things to make a note of before we start sewing. So I'm going to put in a fresh needle. Always like to do that before I start a project. So I'm going to take the one I was using in my last quilt top and pop in a fresh needle for this quilt. I use the size 80/12s for piecing. Now, normally I'm piecing with my 1/4-inch seam foot, and this machine comes with the option of 2 1/4-inch feet. So this one here with the flange I'll use when I'm just doing my regular seams piecing, and then this one here is the one I'm going to switch to right now for when I'm doing these half square triangles, because I'm sewing right in the middle of the fabric. Don't want to use this one here because that flange will cause distortion and pull. So I'm going to switch to this one here, our 1/4-inch seam foot with no flange on it. As well, if your machine has the option, and mine does, I have a regular stitching needle plate which has the large opening here to accommodate all of our widths of stitches, but it also comes with a straight stitch needle plate, which is fantastic for piecing. You can see there your needle hole is just for straight stitching. So this is the one here that I'm going to use for all of my piecing. It's as well really good if you do so with fine and delicate fabrics. Now that we've sewn our 1/4-inch from the line, we're going to take our ruler and we're going to cut these on the drawn line. And that will give us 4 half square triangles. So with our half square triangles, we're going to press them open. So we press on both sides of the seam. That sets your seam. And then we just press it open, like so. And now we'll repeat that with all 4 squares. Now you're going to take these 4 half square triangles and we're going to trim them up to 4.5 inches. If you've got an actual 4.5 inch square, that's fantastic. It's much easier to do. I can't find mine right at the moment, so I'm just going to use my longer ruler here. What I like to do is line up my 45-degree angle line. Most rulers have these lines on it, so that's what they're for. There's your 45-degree angle line. I'm going to line that up, and then I'm going to trim up at the 4.5 inches, okay? You don't want to just boom line this up against a corner and trim, because then your block might not be squared up properly against that diagonal line, okay? So line up that diagonal to a 45-degree line on your ruler and then trim it down to 4.5 inches. Okay, now that we've got our half square triangle squared up, we're going to do our block layout. So we're going to lay out our 4 green 4.5 inch squares and our 1 print 4.5 inch squares. And now we're going to lay out our half square triangles. And let's see if I can get this right. There we go, to make our 4-point star. Like so. Like so. Like so. And like so. There we go, so pretty. Okay, so now we're going to sew this together in rows. So I'm going to take this row here, and I'm going to do 1/4 inch seam, right sides together, 1/4 inch seam, right sides together. I'm going to bring this right beside my sewing machine so that I don't get my blocks mixed up. Don't laugh, those of you who were with us at our last quilt along and I sewed a whole block incorrectly into my quilt. I'm going to still bring this over to my machine just to make sure. Okay, let's go. I'm going to give it a final press before I square it up. A little bit of best press. And press everything down nice and flat. And there you have it. Here's our first block, the 4-pointed star. Here's our second block. It's called Square in a Square. Okay, for our Square in a Square block, you will have received 3 fabrics, and we're going to cut them down. The pear fabric will be cut into 1 6.5 inch square. This print here will be cut into 2 5 3/4 inch squares. And then this floral print here is going to be cut into 2 7.5 inch squares. I've layered my 2 5 3/4 inch blocks, one on top of the other. And now I'm going to cut diagonally through those 2 squares. And that'll give us 4 triangles. I'm going to do the same with our floral print. I'm going to stack those 2 7.5 inch blocks, one on top of the other. And then I will cut them diagonally, corner to corner. And that will give us 4 triangles out of the floral print as well. Okay, now we're going to take our center square, and what we're going to do is we're going to be sewing these triangles around our center square, like so, and like so. Now, we need to make sure though that we are centering these triangles onto the side that we're sewing it onto. So we're going to head over to the ironing board and we are going to press in some lines to help us find the center points of our square and to help us find the center point of our triangle. Okay, so we're going to bring those over to the ironing board and just press in those little seams so that we can line them up properly. Okay, so you folded your triangles in half to find the center line and then press. And then fold your center square into quarters and then press. Make sure when you're pressing these triangles, don't iron them, just press them down because again, these are cut on the bias of fabric so they will stretch out, okay? Okay, so now we're going to sew these triangles onto the center square. So I'm going to line up our two center points and pin it, and then pin along this edge. And now we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way down that side there. And now we're going to just continue and do the exact same process 3 more times to attach these other 3 triangles onto the center. Finish this portion, we're going to trim up this square to 9 inches by 9 inches. I'm using my slotted Stripology ruler. This is great because you can see here we have our 9 inches and I can line up so that I know exactly I'm having the same amount from this point here left over. So I want it to be relatively even on both sides. So I can line that up with these lines. And then I can say, here we've got about a 1/2 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side. So I'm going to shift it over just a little more. And that way I can see here, okay, great. I've got a 1/4 and a 1/4 and trim it up, and then I'll flip it around and trim it up again. Okay, how pretty is this block looking already? So we're going to do the exact same thing as we did in that first step, but now we are going to add more triangles around this square. So hence square in a square, where the name comes from. So we're going to take these triangles, we're going to bring them over to our ironing board and just give them a little crease there so that we can match up our center points on our triangles to the center points, which I've pressed in there on this center square. Wow, that looks so nice. Okay, so I'm gonna do the exact same thing as we did before, okay? I'm gonna take this, fold it down, pin it, 1/4 inch seam, and so on all the way around. goodness, how pretty is this block? I love it. So now we're just going to trim this up to 12.5 inches. Make sure that when you're trimming it, you really center everything, because you want to make sure that you've got a 1/4 inch on all of these points right here, so that when this gets pieced into the whatever it might be, the next block or the sashing, etc., that you're not going to get your points chopped off. Okay, so square this up to 12.5 inches and you are done. Hope you had fun. And there you have it, the first 2 blocks of our Summer's End sew along, our 4-pointed star and our square and a square block. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you get our upcoming videos. Thanks for watching. See you next week.